Welcome to this session on business responsibility, resource conservation and environmental protection. As you all know, businesses are constrained or regulated by a variety of environmental laws. They cannot emit into the air as they like, they cannot discharge into the water, they cannot destroy mangroves. There are certain laws by Government of India that restricts businesses to conduct their businesses in an environmentally friendly way. When we say business responsibility, resource conservation and environmental protection, we just don't mean complying simple laws. It's beyond compliance of laws. When businesses have to conduct themselves, conduct their operations and distribute their products and services in the society, there are variety of impacts that the business causes on the environment which are not controlled, which are not regulated by the existing laws. But still, businesses have to identify the impacts that they are causing and responsibly have to avoid all such operations and do not cause any kind of environmental negative impacts and also contribute towards resource conservation. How business will do it and what kind of approaches that the business have to adopt is what our panel is going to discuss further. Our panel has a number of members from the regulatory agencies regulating the environment and also members, representatives from the business and also some from the academia. I am sure this will be an all-round panel and we will get variety of stakeholders' opinion on this particular issue. I call upon all of you to enjoy these deliberations and join us in the deliberations.
Well, what was mentioned by Dr. Rambabu, the NVGs, the recent guidelines of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which talks about national voluntary guidelines and environmental conservation is embodied into this, the text of these guidelines. But still there are a lot of, issues that the corporates have in their mind. Well, when we talk of environmental conservation, we have plethora of environmental legislations. Are they not sufficient? That's the precise questions. And when we have all sorts of, legislations ranging from forest conservation to air pollution control and water pollution control and prevention of, all sorts of natural resources, then why do we need a separate sort of, guidelines? Are they not sufficient? Sometimes, yes, these are the questions posed by, communities sometimes, and the corporates also struggle a lot. Well, this particular issue is under debate both at, corporate levels as well as the communities level. And that's precisely the, reason that the issues are, being debated at a government level and also in the judiciary. Well, we have on this panel an advocate, eminent advocate, is a practicing lawyer also. So let me, pose this, issue before Dr. Mahabal, Advocate Mahabal, that the recent judgments that Honorable Supreme Court has pronounced for environmental conservation. So what do you think about that and how the corporate would respond to this particular, issue which Supreme Court has pronounced very recently?
The judgment which Honorable Pratik Shah is referring to is probably related to case number 423, which was of 2010, placed before Supreme Court relating to 3G spectrum allocation, 2G and 3G spectrum allocation. Subsequently, in the last year, again government made one more reference to Supreme Court, asking them whether auction should be the only way of eliminating such kind of resources, whatever they are, with the government, and whether it should be only auction. There was one more interesting judgment on the case of drawing of water, subsoil water, groundwater, by Coca-Cola in Kerala. to rightly understand from industry's point of view, it will be better if we read all these three judgments together and then look to these three judgments from industry's side of view. The basic lesson that industry will have to take from all these three judgments is, whenever they want to participate in any kind of buying, developing rights or these kind of natural resources, is that they should be on the fair side of the law. One thing which you can very well understand from that Supreme Court judgment is, everybody who got finally affected in this spectrum allocation was in some way or the other manipulator of this whole process also. So none of them in legal term was a bona fide buyer. They were also trying to manipulate the game, tilt it in their favor, so finally they got affected. As a lawyer also, I'm more known to be a conservative lawyer. That is, my chamber practice is much more than the aggressive court practice. I normally do not advise industry, do whatever you want, I am there, I will help you in the court. Rather, I tell them, I try to help them in such a way that matter will never ever go to court. I ensure by my advice that they are more on the fair side of the law. And most of the time, everybody, every one of us, whether it is an industry or an individual, we all know what we are doing, whether it is fair or not. But most of the time, like I used to do it in my office. If we keep our office clean, then we can think better. And I used to write below that Mahatma Gandhi. Actually, I used to say that. But if I say so and write that, then nobody notices the importance of that. So I used to write Mahatma Gandhi. Same way, everyone from you generally know what is right and what is not right. And you know, respect your mind, respect what your mind says. Generally, within the structured organization, your bosses, the interests of the organization are little different than a decent person. So as a person, as an individual, you will always know whether I should participate in this kind of a process or not. And sometimes you will feel that, okay, if anybody and everybody is anyway going to do that, why not I also do it? But then there are great chances that you will suffer at the end of the day. So only precaution I will always advise while dealing with natural resources. Incidentally, I have a little different opinion that 3G spectrum was a resource but was not a natural resource. And Supreme Court also has said that it's a resource, not necessarily a natural resource. Subsequently, all other things like forest, coal, all these references, they are natural resources. So that is all I would like to say.
Well, normally it happens that, when government fails, that, courts take over. So I remember, 202, the very famous judgment of Honorable Supreme Court on wildlife matter, which says that not to remove the flora and fauna may even, even if it is dead, deceased or dried. So, like, Supreme Court took over the entire issue and compelled all the states to frame the buffer zone beyond this, up to the 10 kilometer from the wildlife parks and sanctuaries. So courts have been reacting on these issues very aggressively. May it be wildlife matter, may it be wetland matter or any similar other natural resources, may it be coal or similar other mining issues. Does it mean that, we don't have adequate government policies, or the regulations are not enough, or are we not going, as far as government policies are concerned, are we not going in a right direction? Let me pose this question to Mr. Kulkarni.
Good morning. So when it comes to resources, it can be seen from two perspectives. In industry, we look from raw material point of view. Raw material conservation, we say, is a conservation of resources. Look at broader perspective from national point of view. Your air, water, land, and biodiversity are resources on which entire country depends. So are we going to look into narrow perspective from industry, from raw material conservation point of view, where we can advise that economy and environment development go together, is our choice. As far as regulations are concerned, over the years we have so many brilliant regulations and policies. One wonders that when everything is there, why ground realities are totally different. For example, our national forest policy is dated 1988. We had pollution abatement policy in 1992. Rio Summit, that time we had pollution abatement policy. We had national conservation strategy announced that time. We have environmental protection policy of 2006. Look at this legislation from different perspective. From raw material conservation, we are having emission or effluent standards. That is what industry is supposed to meet and improve upon it. From resource conservation point of view, we are having ambient standards. Nobody looks into ambient standards as such, how industry is going to meet it. But when the cumulative environmental pollution index has now come up, that individually whatever industry is doing, what is the collective effect of it? Because these ambient air quality standards, water quality standards, these are for common people for their enjoyment. We have to look into it. Second thing is, when I was student, since those days we are talking of mass-based standards, assimilative capacity-based standards. We talk of many things, we don't take them forward. For example, something like say 15 years back, NERI had carried out carrying capacity studies. Logic was, environment has limited supportive capacity and assimilative capacity, and all our developmental plans should be within carrying capacity. To my knowledge, some 3-4 studies were done, reports were submitted, and it died its own moment. Only in a week in conferences and seminars and meetings, we just mentioned carrying capacity, just like sustainable development. We don't have not tried to translate all these good things into real life. For raw material conservation, we had Cleaner Production Center in National Productivity Council. I don't know what is the present status of it. Central Pollution Control Board, long back in I think 1983-84, had prepared maps for say preferable locations for siting of industries. That means everything we have been talking for 20 years, we are not taking anything to logical conclusion. Take recent examples, coastal regulation zone notification. Earlier notification in 91, recent regulation 2011. It talks of coastal zone management for conservation of coastal resources. We look into it only for CRZ clearance point of view, not from CRZ coastal regulatory zone for coastal resource management. We also have wetland conservation rules. Nothing has happened subsequently. So if you have checklists, whether government has policies, rules and regulations for addressing certain issue, for resource conservation, we have everything on paper, but nothing is getting translated on the ground. That is a basic problem. Thank you.
It appears that, we have plethora of legislation and there are ample opportunities for the businesses to respond for compliance. But still, there are certain lacunas in the system as it appears, because everywhere we see there are a lot of conflicts going on as far as, the community concerns are, there. I do remember a case when, in Gujarat, when we received a proposal for construction of a port in an area which was having some sort of a mangrove patch. It wasn't a very luxuriant mangroves, but yes, it was a man-made planted mangrove patch over over an area of 15 hectares. So when we received the proposal, we said no, we can't allow that. But as far as coastal regulation zone law was concerned, this area did not have mangrove when the plan was prepared, so it wasn't prohibitory at that point of time. But later on it was planted, so it was a some kind of a, we can say, artificially created mangrove area, and company said, okay, I want to use this 15 hectares of area and I'll plant much larger. We were struggling at that point of time what to do, and then we said, okay, you will demonstrate 50 hectares of mangrove plantation first, and then would take up another 200 hectares of mangrove plantation. against the compensation as part of the compensation. Although it wasn't there as part of regulatory mechanism in the CRZ notification, but we did experiment. We posed it to Government of India. Government of India did also accepted that challenge, and they approved this plan. What happened? The company came forward with a request that we want to have a meeting at the level of, say, highest level. All the secretaries of various line departments need to be there. The chief secretary chaired that meeting, and company said, okay, you have been asking us to go for mangrove plantation in 250 hectares of area in all, which to the size of our company it seems to be very small effort. We want to do something unless it's really of some scale and size where we also get some good credit. And the company made a proposal that we want to go for mangrove plantation in 500 hectares of area. But the question that company posed to the government, where is the land? You tell me the land, because I need not to buy the land. You show me the land where I can do the plantation. Two, give me the expertise from the forest department. We'll pay for them. So all these issues of deployment, they are equally important and of very high concern. Later on it happened so that company never ended their efforts, and today they have done the plantation more than 1,000 hectares of area on Gujarat coastline, especially the South Gujarat coastline. There are ample examples that companies perform beyond the regulations, beyond the law. But one side we have been struggling that in spite of having n number of legislation, there are conflicts going on, and that's precisely the reason that various line ministries in Government of India or various departments are coming out with their own guidelines and regulations. And I'm reminded to very recent circular that SEBI has issued, and if I'm not wrong, in July this year, SEBI has made it mandatory for top 100 listed companies to have their own environmental conservation guidelines and incorporate their non-financial disclosure as part of their audit report, which was to be published for this financial year. Let me pose this question to Dr. Shashi Bhushan. How the companies would react to this SEBI circular, and if you can throw some more light on this circular and the implications that it would have, because it has right now started for top 100 companies, but there are countries like Singapore where it's compulsory for all listed companies to have this type of reports prepared. And are we as a country prepared both legally, financially and professionally to meet with these challenges?
If you look at the national voluntary guidelines, the 9 principles, it proposes a kind of wish list. An ideal organization, business organization should have these attributes. It should be transparent, it should be ethical, it should have a good governance structure, and so on and so forth. The point is, how do we, it should be environmentally responsible, go beyond the law and all that. The point is, how do we convert this wish list into reality? What are the thoughts on that? What are the options in front of us? See, one is, we leave it completely voluntary. If you wish, you follow it. If you don't wish, don't follow it. Another extreme is, no, everything you make it mandatory and say you have to do it. Now we had heard discussions yesterday. You also heard Mr. Boralkar's view. Image of legislation over large complicated web of legislation is not going to help. It's going to slow down the growth. It's going to create complications in achievement, deployment. And so is the case if you leave it completely voluntary. My thoughts, personal thoughts on this is, if we can create some enabling environment, if we can create some systems, if we create some expectations in society, we can give an impetus to deploying these national voluntary guidelines. We can bring down the time. Today, see, the national voluntary guidelines has come. Who has prepared it? a set of experts who believe that these are good things, good attributes a corporate should have. Now, what can we do to make this a desire of the community around? Instead of limiting it to the experts, what if all the community around, all the people around believe in these things? Then what happens? Living up to the expectation. The rule of the organizations will live up to the expectation of the people. And they will come out of this, their own hibernation, and do something additional in line with the voluntary guidelines to create a difference in the area of environment, in the area of governance, and so on and so forth. This is one point. Reporting, answering directly to the question, the SEBI circular for reporting this, reporting the non-financial, giving the non-financial disclosures for the top 100 companies, in my opinion, would certainly create an enabling environment. When you report, you do tend to look into within and ask yourself whether I'm over-reporting or under-reporting. Believe me, most of us, when we start reporting, and I can tell you from my own experience, I was a part of sustainability reporting group in my earlier organization. When you start reporting, you tend to overwrite. But then, the very next step, you come back and look within, look, I have over-reported. Let me make sure that what I have reported is actually done. So reporting is one of a great enabler for soul searching, putting systems and putting practices in place to live up to the things you have reported, probably slightly over-reported as per the human nature. So I'm sure this initiative or this circular has a positive vibe to give in the organization. There would be aberrations, there would be people who would shortcut and may not report, but those aberrations are aberrations. And if you can do something to enable our expectation of the society, raise the expectation of the society, those will fall in line. And what we can do to raise the expectation of the society, the people around us, again the same old thing, and the most valuable thing, making aware the people around. Education, awareness campaign. If the society knows, see today there are some of the things which are taken for granted. For example, the largest civil society believes that we should not come out naked from our house and roam on the street. We don't do that. Tomorrow, if the society around us tells us, we don't expect a good corporate to pollute the neighboring environment. We don't expect, we expect the corporate factory, the factories around to be transparent. The corporates will come up to that level because they have to meet they have to survive in this society. I'll give you an example. Again, drawing from one of the principles which talks about transparency, and it would certainly help in the matter of environmental conservation. Supposing a factory which is situated in the middle of the town or certain part of the town. Normally a factory is characterized by a high boundary wall. People living around the factory do not know what is going on inside. And if you ask anybody, people say, I don't know, they are making a lot of profit, they must be doing some hodgepodge inside the factory. That kind of feeling the people have, isn't it? Suppose the factory, the organization takes up a campaign. Every week I'll invite the members of the people living around, the society around, for a factory visit. Organizes a small transport, invites people, takes them through their works for 2 hours or 3 hours, explain what they are doing in that. What happens? What is the result? What is the result you expect? People around will have more sense of confidence. The organization gets support of the people. What does organization gain in value terms? If you invite somebody in your house, don't you clean up your house? There will be good housekeeping automatically a result of this. When you throw open your production premises for visit by outsiders. So bonus will be a good housekeeping, you'll always get. Bonus would be to the top management assurance that nothing garbage is going on inside. So the beneficiary will be corporate too. And mostly it is corporate. So higher level of confidence by the society, by a simple action of a regular factory visit, following the principles of transparency embodied in the National Voluntary Guidelines. Many corporates may not believe that, although they may be saying overtly. They may say, if people may come and look at our weaknesses, and they may come and, question us in public. But then, if such a thing does happen, would you not take action to correct those mistakes? As a senior management sitting somewhere away from the factory, would it not be a comforting program for you to get an assurance from your own people and the people around that whatever you are doing is right? So the corporate must see the value which comes to its own organization by way of following these voluntary guidelines. Once they are able to see, business is very, very intelligent, business people are very intelligent. If they see a win-win situation, I'm sure they will be more open to implementation and the job of implementation, and thereby creating a different society of future, corporates of future would be more simpler, more easier. I'll give you one more example. And that is for creating an enabling environment. One of the organizations where I work created a forum, senior citizens forum of the township around. There was a particular, I later on analyzed, the senior citizens are more neutral, experienced and unbiased people. Younger ones may have some axe to grind, some immediate roles, but senior citizens are more balanced people. Now, senior executives of the company used to discuss openly the issues in the vicinity, issues in the community, and some wonderful thoughts and suggestions used to be there from the senior citizens, never asking only the things which the company should do, but rather many suggestions coming up, many innovative ideas coming up, how together they can pool in their resources, their thoughts, their knowledge to make a difference in the society. One of the things which came up that many of you would be knowing, in environmental area, there are now machines available where biological waste can be converted into fertilizer, compost. There are machines which are low cost and which can cater to, let's say, 100 households or something like that. Many ideas can we put such an equipment for 100 houses around, and some of the volunteers, senior citizens volunteered that we will run them. Such innovative ideas could come because of transparent enabling system which enabled senior citizens around to participate in an initiative for making their own, for bringing own benefit to the community around. So I'm sure if all of us try and give some thought in creating an enabling environment, if our government thinks, if our social organizations think, if our NGOs think, if our regulators think, to creating an enabling environment, the deployment would certainly lead to benefit to the society in terms of environmental performance, in terms of saving of resources, and many other good things which we want to create a corporations of future, society of future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Prasad. What transpires is, yes, corporates should welcome this type of, mandatory requirements which SEBI has, issued the circular very recently. But, what's the view, emerging is, do we really need to have a mandatory? Because when we talk of national voluntary guidelines, one side we talk of voluntary, one side we talk of mandatory. And we always struggle because when we talk of mandatory, we already have plethora of legislation. The other side, corporates have been, talking about beyond the compliance, and the community, communities in many cases, they do not have faith in what corporates have been, talking about. So how to, the things would, percolate further in this particular direction. What type of, convergences, that we are really looking at? May I, request Ajay to respond on this particular issue.
Thank you, Hardik. In fact, just listening to the discussions, I was having two scenarios in mind. One was the corporate governance coming under the corporate rules, and second is the environmental governance coming from the environmental laws and regulations. And sticking to this particular subject, both of them need to converge at some point of time. When we speak about the corporate governance, internationally there have been so many developments. One of the basic development which started in 1990s is about principles of responsible investment, PRI. So UNEP started with this particular concept. In fact, two banks of India are member of that particular group, and they have 10 principles which are more or less coming down to what we are talking today. So these principles of responsible investments again talk about voluntary guidelines. It's not a compulsion per se, but most of the leading financial institutions in the world have already prescribed to that. And many of the corporates are also following that when they are talking about the international operations. Unfortunately, in India, only two banks there are about 110 registered financial institutes, only two are from India. In the corporate, there are many, and I have not seen any Indian name per se in that. So this is from the corporate point of view, which is now coming down to from the SEBI rule and Company Act and all others. From environmental point of view, these principles are already in place, but they are mandatory in nature. When we speak about mandatory, there are 3 or 4 instances I would like to say. First and foremost is the annual report, what is called section, that is Form 5 under the Environmental Protection Rules. Each and every industry is mandatory. It is mandatory for them to submit a resource conservation plan of the last year to the government. And unfortunately, this particular provision is not really taken very seriously by the industries also, as well as the regulator also. I know for sure, because I worked in the regulatory organization for a long time, only 3 to 4% of the industries were submitting this Form 5. And this is a typical resource. What we are talking today, resource conservation talks about what is the pattern last year, what is the pattern this year. So you get a very good trends and different resources, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Vijay Kulkarni. It is not only the raw material, but talks about water, air, electricity, all types of resources. Now the second phase of this has already started from last about 3 to 4 years. And one of the basic thing which has started is the transparency. Starting from the transparency point of view, the environmental performance reports need to be put on the website. So in fact, when we get the environmental clearance, every 6 months the compliance report has to be given, so they are coming on the website. This is also corporate governance. And in fact, many states, including Maharashtra, Gujarat, we know, industries have been asked to install certain environmental monitoring systems. And those monitoring systems need to put the data on the website on a continuous basis. But unfortunately, let me tell you, there are about 14 to 15 industries which have put it on the website. None of the industry is showing the correct data and the present data. They always show some 2 months back data, and that too such a fantastic data that any environmentalist will not really look into that data. So there is definitely a gap between the society's expectation from the corporates and corporates' response to the transparency which is expected from the environmental regulations, which is really unfortunate, and I think this is going to be a point of action in coming days. The second important aspect what I would like to drive here is we have now new regulations in place, including the green tribunals and all that, and resources, raw material is the point the corporates are striking today. But nobody really talks about what resource depletion they are causing because of their activities, like pollution caused because of the industry. And now this particular polluter pays principle is going to be implemented in the country. So from the input point of view, okay, these SEBI's guidelines, the even present environmental laws are taking care of that. But the aftermath of the industry's operation is going to be a big issue, and I think that that has not been covered. Conservation, when we talk about it, is always from the raw material point of view. So what impact is going on, what type of conservation efforts, or what type of, I would say, the degradation impacts the industry operations will have, will also be a necessary part of the environmental management plan. So I think laws are already in place. Only the thing is the corporates will have to tighten up the socks and get into mood.
Well, thanks, Ajay. The laws are already there, and corporates need to respond to these laws properly. But there are always, the questions posed by corporates, as we have been hearing, that why should I do it? I'm an entrepreneur. It's my business to for an example, say let's take the case of mining. The government has allocated me the mine, and yes, environment is likely to be deteriorated because that's the core activity over here. I can't mine out without disturbing the topsoil and so on. So there are always conflicts in this direction. The other side of it, corporates also pose this argument that it's the government duty to do the development part on the ecological aspects and so on. When government fails, they ask the corporates to take over this job. We have already been having n number of responsibilities, and it's not our core functionary. So what do you think how far this argument of corporate is true, Dr. Vijay Kulkarni?
Anyway, well, before answering what Hardik has said, I will mention one thing. Yesterday I was arguing for my organization and why don't we require sustainability reporting, but I will give you other side of it also. He mentioned about financing by international organizations. We have taken large finance for one of our road projects from EPFI compliant financial institution. When we went into EPFI principles and details and when our auditing is done, we realize that many things we are doing, but we are not documenting. For example, discrimination based on caste, creed, sex in your HR policies. We have not documented. So at top level, at corporate level, we know it, but my project manager will not know it, that yes, this is organization policy, so when he is recruiting someone, he should not do it. Second thing is what we are doing for upliftment of local people. We are doing it sporadically here and there. But when we are implementing large project or taking finance from international organizations, what are we doing for skill development of project affected population? We were happy that we are doing something, but there was no measurement as such. And this compliance with EPFI provided us insight and insight to our top management that we need to do more. Now coming to this national voluntary guidelines, I mentioned a lot of legislation, policies, regulations we are having. Where the things are missing? Even in our environmental protection of 1986 penalty, which is mentioned is 1 lakh rupees, perhaps 1 lakh rupees was a very large amount in 1986. Now whether organization will prefer to pay the penalty or comply with the legislation, that remains the question. So our existing legislation was providing enough tooth in terms of financial penalty. Yes, there are penalties available. Closing down industries, this Pollution Control Board keeps on serving notices based on your emission or effluent standards. That means what happens at the end of road. It doesn't give you anything insight for improving of your industry. So national voluntary guidelines, if they are coming through organizations like SEBI, will definitely give it. Where does the problem lie? Ultimately, this report is to be signed by auditing firm. Now, auditing firms are compatible with accounting policies and auditing standards. Do we have anything based on which auditing firms will also feel comfortable for signing such reports? or auditors to audit it or industry to argue when qualifier comes, objections come from auditing firm that you are not done auditing, you don't have enough records. We have not given any thought to it that ultimately when auditor is signing that report, and especially big auditing companies are more careful. You can catch hold of some small auditor, he will say, okay, tomorrow my auditing license goes, I don't mind. But if a responsible auditing company has to sign such reports, where are the standards and where are the guidelines? For example, if when I say I'm recycling 60% of my wastewater, am I keeping record of it? One part of it. So what sort of record keeping is required? Now when these new voluntary guidelines are coming up, are we telling industry that if you are complying with national voluntary guidelines, XYZ records, for example, 6 monthly records to Pollution Control Board, environmental statement or EC compliance reports, you need not submit henceforth, so that your documentation and reporting burden we are reducing. Because Ministry of Environment has one set of legislation, Ministry of Corporate Affairs is coming with second set of legislation, SEBI is coming with third set of legislation, so industry says whether our document is record keeping and reporting or whether you are supposed to produce something. So all these organizations, agencies will have to work together and somewhere they have to converge, like Ajay was saying. And let there be one set of reporting, industry will be very happy, like your accounting annual report, which is auditable report, is only one agency. You don't have to go for 10 agencies. Similar convergence has to come up in future.
In fact, as it has transpired, it's a Form 5 which is mandatory for Pollution Control Board, submission to the Pollution Control Boards, then Ministry reporting for environmental clearance, this corporate social guidelines which Ministry has very recently come out. Then we have SEBI circular, then we have corporate, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, this NVGs. So there are plethora of the things, how if we don't comply, what do you think would be, the scenario, how the courts would react, because the companies are always, scared of, the longest litigations, especially on the environmental conservation side. There have been ample litigations. How do we, really need to take up this issue, Dr. Mabal?
Industries most of the time have now learned to read the law as the menu card. This is the wrong that I do and this is how much I pay. As long as there is no punishment whereby you are required to go to jail, they are not really worried. Most of the violations that industries commit are of the nature of not running the effluent treatment plant, not having the control equipment, and the damage to the environment. So also the savings that they have done by not having the effluent treatment plant or by not operating it properly, nobody really measures or assesses that in terms of rupee value. Both ways, there is savings, there is illegal gain, and the damage to environment. I always feel that laws sort of regulate and prohibit. Policies laid down sort of enable you to do something. And Constitution is all freedom only, 19G, that is carrying out business, or right to life 21. So law is the minimum that one is expected to do. Law is not the maximum that one is supposed to do. So law is only to see that you are not falling below expectations of everything. And what you have to really stick to is the policy. What best you can do.
We say that, law is at least the bare minimum thing that the corporates are expected to perform at the level, and then through this type of initiatives, they are expected to go beyond the compliance and so on. I'm reminded to a case, where the company established another, a port, again a port sector experience. The company set up a port in a beautiful, luxuriant mangrove areas. The mangroves were, destroyed. The company got the environmental clearance at that point of time to set up that, port. Probably a bad decision of a particular, point of time that was taken, but yes, the ministry allowed that location And then the port went on expanding. There were n number of conditions imposed into the environmental clearance letters. But yes, there were certain degradations over there. The company said that, okay, I'm ready to compensate. Just tell me, no, I have got the environmental clearance, I have got all the permits to construct a port over here. What's my fault? Yes, it has, because of the port-induced development, there are disturbances which were beyond my, control. But I'm still ready to compensate. Now the laws are different over here. Laws do not talk of compensation at this point of time. And a lot of litigations are still going on. I'm not sure, how these, the mandatory guidelines, when we talk of the mandatory guidelines, how this would add, the further burden. Although, the corporates have accepted this type of initiatives and tried to convert into the opportunity, but there are a lot of pitfalls also on the way, as I see. Dr. Prasad, would you like to comment on this part?
This is a situation where damage to the environment is a consequence as a result of the development for which the permits are granted by the state. State means by the society, by the regulators. You see, the development and environment conservation in a country like us, particularly where we have a large population to feed and the poverty is a major problem, development has to go on. But we have to see how we can take care of the environment also. Now here the role becomes very delicate. Corporates, although you may have clearances in place with certain conditions and all that, but the voluntary guidelines and a good corporate, if a corporate wants to be a sustainable corporate and want to do business for a long time, they cannot shrug their responsibility of minimizing the damage to the environment. If, let's take an hypothetical situation. There are two corporates in similar situation. One takes a position that yes, something is getting damaged arising out of operation. I have no business to sort of satisfy or take care of a few stakeholders at the cost of damaging something which benefits to a larger group of stakeholders. One organization takes this view and tries to do in coordination with the government, comes out with a program to make compensatory effort. The other corporate said, look, I am perfectly within the law. It is not my job. Let the regulatory agency related with the coastal conservation take care of this. In a situation where society is getting more and more educated, in a situation, imagine a situation 10 years down the line when the media ingress is more, all of us become more conscious of her. Do you think the second type of organization would get a favorable response in their business activities from the society as a whole? I don't think. If the organization is wise enough, if the organization follows and claims to follow a good code of conduct, they would voluntarily choose a path which tries to minimize the damage. Now, because those bigger organizations and those organizations where the knowledge is there and they are able to see the future, they are looking for a long-term sustainability, I think these voluntary guidelines would titillate them, would tickle their thoughts and bring them to the right line of action, which is good for the people, planet, and the government and the company, and create a win-win situation. So I think these guidelines, although there may be one more addition to the large guidelines, and these guidelines do have their own positive role to play, and we must look at it in a positive light. Thank you.
So
in all the corporate thinks that it should be converted into the opportunity to tell to the community that yes, we do operate our business, but not at the cost of the environmental and natural resources. Maybe since we are approaching to the timeline, shall we have some quick questions from the audience and then we conclude this session. I request you to, the panelist whom you want to pose the question, if you can make it very clear.
Sonal Kaushik from Environmental Management Center. Since morning we've been hearing so many management systems and this and that, whatever. A thought which was just coming in my mind when everybody was speaking, maybe any of you can answer my question. What if the 100 listed companies need to do NVGs, the reporting this time? What is the punishment if they don't do it?
Dr. Ajay, would you like to?
Actually, these are the voluntary guidelines, and when as far as financial regulations are there, they are part of the non-financial disclosure, so they will have to be there, and the entire credibility of that organization depends on that. I don't think presently there is any punishment for that, but their report will not be accepted.
Now I was just thinking, would they get delisted like Singapore, or is just that? Okay.
Hello. If you look at the SEBI circular, they are referring to certain clause of listing clauses. I'm not very sure, I'm not a legal expert, but I think those clauses relate to if the companies do not follow the reporting guideline, SEBI would have the power to delist them from the stock exchanges.
Okay. And will they be,
at least the circular implies that way.
And will they be audited? I mean, the reports that they submit to SEBI, will they be audited by?
The circular is not very explicit on that,
yeah.
But it is expected that if you report in your annual report, which is mostly audited, the financial part is completely audited.
The financial I understand, but
yeah, this part also I don't know. It is not very explicit, but then apparently it does have connotation. It does have connotation because it is linked to your listing agreement and all that. The kind of disclosure which you are making has to have substantial basis for it, which can only be claimed if you have got it assured by third party. Yeah, it has the connotation, but I don't know. It doesn't appear to be mandatory at the moment.
I'm wondering, like for for annual reports, the financial performance is always audited by CA firms or something.
That's
like
right.
That. And for non-financial performance, audits will be done by SEBI. So that's a question mark in my mind. Like people who do not understand. Like if I say if it's audited by pollution control boards, the environmental performance, it does make some sense. And suppose if I talk about HR related, because if you see, there are so many things which are HR related also. That is also audited by financial, experts. If it should be audited by somebody else.
Madam, what it looks like, as I can see now, probably in the first year, a non-audited report would do. Gradually it will evolve. The people will see the report and gradually it will evolve, and maybe later on certain norms may appear.
But I think most of the auditing firms now, big auditing firms, have a regular environmental specialist on board. I know it for very sure because many of them used to come us for environmental audit for listed companies on a suo motu ground, not on a voluntary ground. But I think most of the auditors are now well equipped with the environmental expertise. So definitely that will come in picture.
I don't think so.
But secondly, I think the other parts, what you said, is there are so many as we said, there are certain regulations from the environmental law point of view. If you see the circular of MOEF of April 2011, they have made it mandatory for all the PSUs, all the big corporates and all the listed companies, not listed per se, but big corporations, to frame an environmental responsibility framework. And within that, it is mandatory to have an environmental policy as well as the entire guidelines, operational framework also. So now when we go for environmental clearance or some new expansion projects, their environmental policy and environmental safeguard framework will be evaluated. So there, again, there is no legal punishment per se, but their project will not be considered. So it's as simple as that.
I would like to bring one point to your notice. In the circular, there is a reference that if the companies are already coming out of a report called Corporate Sustainability Report, then they need not include those disclosures in the financial report. They can map those requirements and only indicate give the references. To that extent, it means that those auditing part is not very clearly indicated, but it would evolve, I'm sure, in course of time.
Maybe we have a very quick couple of questions. Yes.
Mr. Shah, I have a question. The SEBI circular is applicable for the listed companies which are big. There's the last sector called MSME, small and medium. Now, MSME sector is the one which contributes to GDP maximum. Now, this sector has one typical problem, which is from the resource point of view. Services like e-waste management, services like wastewater treatment plant, services like effluent treatment plant can be allowed to, I don't know what's the policy for the Gujarat Pollution Control Board, can they be allowed to share? For example, at Thane, that's called Thane Manufacturer Association, effluent treatment plants are shared. Everybody cannot invest in all the resources, e-waste management, wastewater treatment plants. So the small company, can they share with a group of cluster of companies, and it can be, that is something which I thought.
Specifically to Thane, it is a national policy to create a common environmental infrastructure. In fact, Gujarat and Maharashtra are the leaders in common facilities. In fact, now they have more CETPs than Maharashtra also. They have more hazardous waste facility than Maharashtra. So this is a common policy across the country. In fact, there is a scheme of Government of India where Government of India support financially also for this common infrastructure. This is not only in water. This is in water, wastewater, hazardous waste. Now we are talking about acid recovery plants and other resources generation.
To the MSME sector or anybody?
It is for all. It is for all.
Okay.
Yeah, largely for SMEs, but yes, for large sectors also they can be part of that scheme.
Hi, my name is Ashish Gowde and I'm a social entrepreneur. I was with Ford in US for 7 years, and at that time they had invested in like $30 million to redo the whole factory, that the Rouge factory as they call it, in Dearborn, Michigan. That was built by Henry Ford. The original one was built by Henry Ford probably in 1900 something, right? So they invested this 30 million because they had a pending threat of litigation or something which was worth $44 million. So there was a clear business case to invest in something that was environmentally friendly. So that is the power of law, right? So if there is some kind of legal penalty, then there is a business case. Corporates measure everything in terms of business case. And in general, the second statement I'm going to make is, I'll quote a professor of mine, he used to say that in general capitalism is based on greed. To control greed, there has to be very strong law and order situation, which is a little bit missing in this country, or at least implementation is very weak. So putting these two data points together, I just wanted to get a perspective from various eminent panelists. When will these kind of things happen in India? Because out of curiosity, when you look up some penalties, they are like 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees. That is like per hour profit of many companies, even MSMEs. So nobody has this business case to invest in cleaner technologies. And so I hope you get my point.
There are two streams of law, criminal and civil. I am a criminal lawyer. But there is also very strong system or jurisprudence under civil law. Most of the time, I always also wonder that whenever there is a theft, whenever there is a assassination, people are happy the moment that person is punished, he goes to jail. But also, out of his act, a second jurisdiction arises wherein actually I can prosecute that person for damaging me and seek compensation also. And since he has been anyway convicted, because the quality of proof that is required in criminal law is very high as against the civil law, I am duty bound to get the civil compensation also. Generally, if you read the punishment, criminal punishment, it is always 7 years in jail and 30,000 rupees. So we always wonder, even after rape and murder, 7 years jail but only 30,000 rupees, because that's what is provided in criminal law. Civil law goes hand in hand, and you can also prosecute the same person under civil law and seek damages of 5 crores. Nobody generally does that. Similarly, I was talking to Dr. Ajay Deshpande. Now, National Green Tribunal is already there in place, and the biggest powers that are vested with NGT is to enter in the civil cases also. So the moment somebody feels nuisance of odor, some problems out of effluent damages to their farms and villages, they can very well sue the industry. And once those kind of class actions, many persons getting affected in a similar way, because the kind of damage at the moment provided is very less, 25,000 or something, but that is per person. In a village, when there are 6,000 persons getting affected out of the same thing, like pollution, smog, nuisance, odor, the amount of damages will be very high. That is already in place.
We are, running late. The last question. You wanted, no? Yeah.
Sir, my question, I am Balaji, I am from NITI, I am an environment management student. My question is to Raghunath Narbal sir in specific. We were talking about the penalties as here, that is only 1 lakh in EPA. Even I could quote from IPC also section 277, which is making noxious, environment noxious, where penalties is only few hundreds. So what is hindering the government to go ahead and make revisions? Since it has been so long, we are getting amendments frequently for standards. For example, ambient air quality standards, we got amendment within 15 years. It was introduced 94 and we got amendment 2009 in standards. Why not in penalties as well? What is hindering government not to go ahead and make revisions in penalties?
The purpose of criminal law is to create fear and deter the person from doing that crime. So penalties which were provided under criminal laws were petty. The real power of criminal law is putting someone behind bar, that is snatching his freedom. Civil law in India is evolved mainly to the extent of compensation. But punitive damages, exemplary damages, those are not really evolved by case laws. They will evolve subsequently. In America, you must be reading that somebody spilled over hot coffee and he got the compensation of 1 million. That is because of these exemplary punishments or punitive damages. But compensation is limited to what you suffered, and you don't worry or talk behalf of others. So that benefit you won't get. And that is why those punishments appear ridiculously low. Obviously, government will increase it, like they increase the punishment for traffic violations. But that will always take some time.
There seems to be both, the opportunity into this sector as well as a lot of challenges for corporates. What is transpiring out of this discussion is we have ample legislations. We have good provisions in the law for environmental and natural resource conservation, but still there are a lot of efforts going on these days for making it more of voluntary for corporates to go beyond the compliance, beyond the law for environmental and natural resources conservation, and make them more responsible in this particular direction. But there are various efforts made at different levels. So there are always chances of some sort of a litigation that corporates would expect in case of especially when we talk of mandatory guidelines. The other side we talk of voluntary things. So there are a lot of dilemmas still going on, but maybe in time to come things would get settled down, and corporates as it appears have already started taking up bit positively, especially to enhance the image of corporates in the eyes of the communities and also public at large. I personally feel that yes, this is really a good opportunity, but at the same time, probably we need to put a strong case that let's have a need assessment study carried out. Let's have what Dr. Kulkarni was telling, 15 years back when Miri attempted for carrying capacity kind of a thing. Let's have some kind of a regional study carried out. What can really be, done by various corporates in the same region, so that if one corporate does something and the other corporate comes with its own idea for conservation, are they really, counterproductive to each other, or are they going together for the overall development of environmental and resources, conservation in the region? So maybe, in time to come, these are all the questions which would emerge at much, stronger voice, and even various ministries, I think government would also, need to take up this call that, we need to have a regional kind of a plan prepared wherein we can invite various corporates to take their own kitty for conservation and development to be done. Let me conclude this session. We have taken 10 minutes more than what we were given for. Let me thank all my colleagues on the dais, all the panelists, Dr. Mabal, Dr. Kulkarni, Dr. Prasad, and Dr. Deshpande. Your views have, I think, has gone very well, and let me congratulate all of you for your, very pious views on this particular sector, may it be, from the corporate sector or the government sector, and thanks to one and all for very active participation, and especially, thanks to Dr. Ram Babu, whose untiring efforts have, made this event possible, and giving me this, opportunity to be over here with such an august gathering. Thank you very much.